Hello, and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network, where we reflect on Warbo's most reflected work as it releases. I'm Elliot Diebold.
And I'm Malia Webb.
And we're coming at you live in the Discord for one of the final times. Yeah, I mean, it's really happening. It's the epilogues. Holy shit.
It's here. It almost feels like it came on too fast.
I know. It's fun. I was like saying to people like 12 months ago, I was like, when the epilogues start, I'm just going to keep making the joke that Pale's ending way earlier than I expected, because that will be very funny, given how how Ruben and I have constantly said the opposite the whole time. And then 24.17 happened, and I was like, okay, that actually is a little bit earlier than I expected. But yeah, gosh, I mean, it's not that early though, because next week is actually the 200th episode of Pale Reflections.
Woo!
So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
if you're listening to this before that's happened, try to come to the live recording. We'll hopefully be doing some cool stuff for it. Nothing too extreme, because we're mostly preparing for All Packed Up too. But yeah, we'll try and do something fun to celebrate 200 episodes of this here story.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment.
Not gonna lie, we didn't see that coming. But it's exciting.
Another thing that's exciting is the fan art contest that we've been running. The theme was closure, and it's closed probably by the time
I think
most of you are hearing this.
Yeah.
So
it will be. But it closed around the 11th. Look, if you sneak one in and we haven't started the voting yet, we'll probably take it, because this is going to be our last one. So, But yeah, we've got a few great submissions already. So yeah. The other thing as well, we are doing a fan art awards show in All Packed Up too. And there's going to be a form in the show notes for this episode where you can submit your nominees for some of those various awards. So please go to that link, submit the fan art that you think deserves an award for each category or whatever. That form has a link to Fairlax's sheet, which has like most of the Pale fan art that's ever come out as well, if you want refresher. But yeah, so please submit entrance there for the Pale fan art contest awards.
Yeah, that'll be great. Excited to hear more about APU 2 as the weeks turn on.
Yeah, we've entered panic preparation. It's been like 12 months of Ruben and I being like, yeah, next week I'm going to do X, or next week I'm going to do Y, and just not really ever doing it. And then suddenly the epilogue started, and we're like, oh, we have so much to do. So that's our own faults, but it's going to be fun.
Yes.
But yeah, I suppose with that out of the way, Malia, shall we start talking about Loose Ends 1?
Yes. Well, the first thing I wanted to say before you actually start talking about it is this is such a great arc title, and it just also punched me in the gut.
Yes,
I don't know. It's perfect and sad and great, and yes.
It's so what a perfect epilogue title that is it fits perfectly on theme for the idioms that all the arcs have been using, and it's the epilogues literally kind of exist to tie up loose ends. It's perfect. Yeah, it might be one of the most just straight up arc titles that you're like, yeah, that makes sense.
She's like, yep, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Walbo had this one ready back in arc 4.
The last one will be finish off, because I will finish off a story, but there are always loose ends, and so the epilogues will be loose ends.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff, are you saying that the last epilogue will be Lucy chapter just because her nickname is Loose, so it's loose ends? Because that's a delightfully terrible pun. Yeah, awful. Thank you for sharing that awful pun with us. Anyway, yeah, okay, sorry, loose ends. This is an Avery and a Verona chapter, which is interesting. But yeah, we cut to 3 hours after Ryan and Charles have had their little domestic. And now somebody new is knocking on a door to see the Kenneteers. It's Jude. He's here. He's checking in on the Kenneteers because they're still doing first aid 3 hours later, which I don't know if it qualifies as first aid if it's that been going for that long. But yeah, they're still pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, Lucy does clarify that they haven't actually really been doing first aid the whole time because Verona took a nap, and so I was like, is this a sign that they're going back to like sniping at each other, or is this a sign that they're tired and also they're allowed to be honest about their frustrations? But
Yeah,
also, I'm glad Verona took a nap. I don't know.
Yeah, I also wonder if nap might be an unfair description of what I presume was more just physically passed out from exhaustion, you know? Like she may have just actually gone unconscious.
Sure.
But yeah, there's a lot of fun callbacks to very, very early parts of the story in this chapter
Mhm.
that I can't wait to sort of talk about. But you're right. I also noticed that like Lucy and Verona are a bit snippy right at the start here, and Avery has to play referee. And it was like,
Uh-oh.
that took me back to arcs 12 and 13 where things were the worst between them. But like, yeah, they do just kind of get over it. And I was kind of like, okay, I think this is a sign that it's like, that's not, they're better at dealing with this shit now. Yeah.
Right, because like people get annoyed with each other.
Yeah.
Like,
They're all pretty emotionally raw right now for reasons. Um, so yeah, like I think, yeah, I think it's all good. Like, it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Everyone's rope has already run out.
mhm. Um, Another weird thing that you notice immediately at the beginning of this, and at first you think, is this a mistake? And then you realize it's, been at least several hours since Wildbow posted this, so he probably would have changed it if it was a mistake. So there's no banners, and it was very
I know.
upsetting. I don't know why it was so upsetting, but I was like very disturbed by the lack of
It,
banners.
yeah, it's, I'm trying to like I've been trying to figure out what it like means, like because you're right. Wildbow seems to have made it as a choice, but it hasn't clicked for me why no banners.
Mhm.
Because I think this is the first time we've done no banners, right?
I
Like the prologue had a Lucy banner. I checked
Yes.
that after this. Um,
And I mean, like, I think this is the first Wildbow story that has had banners quite like this, and they've been
yeah,
important. Um, like, they've been symbolic of the Kenneteers' mental states. They've like
yeah.
done all
Like
these
Wildbow's used them a lot in the story. Yeah.
right, and so I'm just sort of like, is this what is this?
Yeah, and I guess especially like there was the whole cracked Lucy banner that may or may not have been a bit of a Charles banner. I'm still kind of unclear on it. Like somebody smart just needs to explain to me what this layer of banner usage that I'm missing is that means it makes sense for Wildbow to have dropped them from the epilogue.
I mean, with Lucy's banner in particular, it could be something about like healing, maybe, hopefully. Like it's I don't remember the last time Lucy described seeing like a knife with her sight or whatever, Um and like their banners were very based on who they were at the beginning of the story, and so maybe like it's just not as appropriate to have those things, although Avery's and Verona still feel um like them. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, if anything, it'd be interesting to highlight that as because I think one thing I think we're going to talk about is sort of I think each Kenneteer goes through a mini version of showing why they're not the people they were at the start of the story.
Mm.
In their sort of epilogue, and it's a bit like it would make sense to start back. Anyway, I don't know. Well, maybe it'll start to make sense later on. Um, I also thought it was super interesting that the epilogue arc is just starting with a main character's point of view. Like,
Mm.
I haven't read Twig, but it's not, usually the epilogues start to tie up these loose ends from other perspectives, I guess.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously Pale's a bit different because it's the first like multi POV story, and it really did feel to me like I was like, okay, we're not done with the Kenneteers at the end of 24.17. But in my head, I was still kind of expecting like Jasmine epilogues or like Sylvia epilogues, like that sort of thing. I thought it was really interesting that Pale is sticking seemingly with the protagonists for at least a good chunk of the epilogues.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that we get this, like, fairly immediate aftermath for the Kenneteers, 'cause I think I was expecting, for there to be some sort of time skip,
Yeah.
whether that's a day or a week or, you know, 3 months or whatever, and yeah, I'm curious as to the reasoning behind the exact cutoff point because it feels like there could have been a denouement or whatever, um, but maybe it's something about, like, the story was the story of, like, the Carmine, um, from, like, we started with the Carmine Beast's death and we ended with Charles's
Charles is
death, I guess, um, the
yeah.
resurgence of the primal Carmine, kind of, um, and I don't know if that's I don't know,
Yeah,
but
well, the other thing that jumped out to me is like what this chapter reminded me of a lot was like arc 8 and arc 14. Like we've talked to Absolute Death a lot about how those two arcs were kind of the recovery arcs.
uh-huh,
Um like especially arc 14 was very much like, okay, in the face of this loss, how do we rebuild? And it wasn't it was more focused, like I don't know, it was very focused on like healing from previous events, and arc 8 was kind of like that too. And this almost felt like a bit like that where but kind of for the whole story, because also the point of this one
mhm,
is there's no more fight to do right now. um so like I think that might be part of it. Was like Pale, I think we talked about this earlier in the arc, but Pale doesn't feel like it's ending. It feels much more like a few of Wabbo's other stories and some stuff where it's like this is the end of what we're seeing, but the story is very clearly sort of saying this isn't like the happily ever after moment.
mm,
Um, and yeah, like I don't know. I think maybe this is part of it. Is it's like Pale's loose ends to tie up is also just sort of establishing. God, I don't feel like I'm explaining this well, but like yeah, this is like Pale's epilogues is focusing still on the protagonists because it's like they're seeing them heal. I guess is like has been a big part of the journey of Pale, and like that is part of it, and we do still need to see that.
mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it does, and it'll be something, um, interesting to keep track of as the epilogues progress, what if we don't get any perspectives other than the Kenneteers in the epilogues? That would be really
Mm,
fascinating, um, but, like,
yeah.
they they say something about the story, um, so, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Like it'll be really interesting to sort of stack them all together at the end, and sort of see how much it maybe still resembles those Arc 8s and Arc 14s and what that is saying about, yeah, Pale's whole journey. Because I feel like Pale has always sort of been you're not going to get just a happy tie off ending, but we've gotten pretty damn close, to be honest.
Mhm,
So yeah, like how Pale's messaging around endings as a concept and happily ever afters will tie into, yeah, the structure of the epilogues.
mhm,
Um, I also, yeah, sorry, I brought it up in the intro thing, but like the fact that this chapter opened with Jude knocking 3 times, I don't know if that was like an intentional reference to like all the stuff with Tash lit last week in 24.17, but I thought it was very funny to open this chapter again with like somebody saying knock 3 times. I don't know. It's just a stupid little joke, maybe.
I mean, Tash is the one true protagonist or something.
I guess it was just like because that was like the big hype, crazy business thing, like last week in 24.17. That was a huge part of why it felt like we won the day. And then it was just
Mhm,
like in the aftermath, kind of starting with like knock, knock, knock. Even though that's like a normal thing for Jude to do to enter that room, it was just a bit like I don't know. It made me feel a little bit like we weren't free from that thing still. And I guess it's only 3 hours later, so maybe it's helping getting us in that mindset. Like we're still kind of there.
hmm. Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't have a ton of interesting things to say 'cause it did not occur to me, but I like it.
Okay, maybe a more normal thing to have latched onto those. I love this story's obsession with the number 3.
Uh-huh.
It was very cute. Like each of these are happening 3 hours later. And obviously, like, yeah, Pale's special number has been 3 for the entire
Mhm.
story. And I love, like, that Walbo's decided to seemingly do these epilogues in increments of 3 hours.
Mhm. And I take it as a good sign that Waldo acknowledging the power and importance of 3 means that we're gonna get 3 threes of epilogues. So we'll get 9 epilogue chapters
I was
in the
worried you were
same
going to
book.
say just 3 epilogues, and I was like, shut your
No.
mouth, Malia. That's not
No.
enough. But
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
okay. Three. No, okay, we need 3 squared. That's fine. But really, 3 to the
3
power of
cubed.
3. We need 27 epilogue chaps. Sorry, Wildboy, I don't make the rules, but 26 more to go. It's, that's just how it is.
Right. It's important for the story.
Yeah. No, I genuinely don't really know how many epilogues to expect, but I'm
Mhm.
excited to see. I hope it is more than 3.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as evidenced by the fact that we're all still here, I think we would all love to read, like, this story for a very long time. Um, but
Yeah.
endings are satisfying.
Yeah, one of the thoughts I kept having as I was live reading this chapter was like, Awabo's mentioned that he's going to do stories in other universes, like between stories in the same universe as Pact and Pale, and like I understand his logic for that. There's a lot of good reasons, but also, does he have to? Like we could just do this forever. Is all I'm saying.
Right. I mean, I would be happy with that.
I
But
know. It's like, I remember one of the reasons I think was like that he doesn't want to get typecast as an author. Like, you don't want to be limited as an author to be stuck with the one universe. And that completely makes sense to me. But also, I mean, if you had to pick a universe to get stuck in for the rest of your life as an author, you could do worse.
totally.
Just saying.
And I feel like he'd have to write 4 or 5 more Otherverse stories before it would overshadow, like, Worm, as being associated with Wildbow in the general eyes
Yeah,
of the
exactly. That's
public.
what we need to. Yeah, that's the end goal, is to make this the primary Wildbow universe.
Mhm. That's why we're all
Yeah. So everybody, everybody, attack Matt and Scott, um, as the faces of the Parahumans universe on the Doof Network. They're clearly
Mm.
the enemy.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, sorry. Getting back to the story and stopping attacking our various partners. I also thought it was really interesting that we open this epilogue back on a path. Because obviously, I mean, it's an Avery POV, like not too surprising that we're on a path.
Mm.
But the Kenneteers have been going to paths a lot the last handful of arcs. It feels like every other chapter almost they're
Hmm.
retreating to a path to plan, to heal, to move around. And I mean, it makes sense. Like, there's a lot of practical reasons for that. Like, especially since Avery got her door making upgrade. Um,
Uh-huh.
but I guess, like, because it's pale, I'm like, just because it's practical, that doesn't mean it isn't also symbolic. In fact, it probably makes it even more symbolic.
Mm.
Um, and so, like, as much as there's like tactical stuff to planning on paths because Charles couldn't hear them there and that sort of thing. I'm uh, it is really interesting that all of their plans and all of their meetups keep happening in this space that's associated with like lostness and isolation and um I don't know, like also like like newness and innovation. Like I kind of like the imagery of the Kenneteers dipping into the paths, which is where like cool new stuff comes from, and like bringing that energy back with them into all these expeditions, as opposed to like we've seen the Negateers use the Abyss to or the Kim's horror stuff to travel around, and that's like that energy they're bringing in is they're retreating to and using for travel like absolute shit places that like the Abyss also kind of generates new stuff, and it's like but they're going into the the bad one, whereas like the Kennedy is constantly retreating to this lonely but also innovative place to plan and move around is like really important. Yeah, I don't know, for their like for the goodness of their plans.
Right.
I
And
don't really have the full version of this thought. It just really stood out to me in this epilogue.
yeah, I do think it says something that I mean the the paths were really scary at the start of the story, and like they still are. It's just that Avery's such a badass that I don't worry about her anymore. And like now we've seen like totally normal humans on paths now, and like they have such control. I mean, they can kind of control where they end up with the promenade boon and everything. It's like, but because it's so scary and so unknown and so niche, I guess it feels like their own safe space. And I guess there always is Wondercand and other um
Yeah.
lost related practitioners out there, or path related practitioners out there, but they yeah. I mean it's it feels like just going back to like chill at a friend's house or something. Like
Yeah, it does.
like they
Yeah.
don't quite have that safety at even Lucy's or Verona's domain or whatever, and those are very much like their spaces. And this is this weird thing where it's like it's Avery's space, but it's not literally Avery's space, so it's more I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Um
I very much see the paths as being a place of like I tend to phrase it as like growth. So whereas the abyss like builds new things by like grinding stuff down and
mhm,
smashing stuff together, the paths kind of they hot glue stuff together and see if it can grow into something cool. And that just
mm,
feels way more Kennett's vibe. And so, yeah, like you're right. It's like as Avery has leveled up and gotten the Garricks and like found a way around, like you can make the paths a safe place to just sort of drop in. And then it becomes this place where you can go to like rest a bit and just like nurture yourself, I guess, as opposed to the abyss where it feels like you change by like grinding yourself away.
yeah. Um or like the ruins are the same sort of thing. The Warrens would be like gross. You don't want to go wherever the fairy are from. Um yeah,
Yeah.
I guess the spirit world exists. Like when you're thinking of like other spaces, um, from what we've seen, at least the paths are the least negative, I
Yeah.
guess. Other than
And it's the
yeah.
most like that aspect of them that is associated with like isolation and distance from Earth is also like that isolation is good for like just being alone and able to like figure your own shit out, right? Like it's that
Uh-huh.
escape from the hustle and bustle. Um which is a weird thing to say about the paths because I think we've literally seen ones with hustles and bustles, but um yeah.
Yeah.
Um I also I wanted to call out there's so many individual just little moments of interaction between characters in these chapters that I don't know if it's because it's the epilogue, but like they just they were so nice. Like there's the bit where Avery puts Snowdrop on her lap and then Gillette hops up on Verona's lap and they put their noses together and
That was cute.
like, yeah, there were so many more. Like, there's the bit where the three Kennedys will call themselves teenagers in sync. When the cool Garrett cousin, sorry, who wants them to was it like smoke a spiffy or what did he say? He said something
I don't
ridiculous. Um, like, and they're
know.
all like, no, we're teenagers. Um, and then, oh yeah, I don't know, like the bit where Avery goes to get up, and then Verona drags her down, and Gillette also drags them down, even though she's a cat, so she's fine. Like, um, it's just like these little moments of delightful character interaction are just they hit so much harder in the epilogues. It feels like,
Yeah. Um, I do think there is something to be said for like this is maybe the last time we're gonna get these, and um, it's also like the the battle is done. Like it has
yeah,
that rebuild arc feeling um of like mundanity, I guess. Like this isn't
yeah,
them. I mean, this is them trying to like heal and rebound from a horrible situation, but it's there isn't a present crisis. So it is just like some people hanging out, and that's really fun.
Yeah, and then but then also it's the epilogue, so it's a little bit sad because it's like it's gonna be gone soon. So
Yes.
it's just very emotional. Like, yeah, it was just like I really had to struggle not to pull like every one of these out and just be like, I love these guys. They're so great.
Look at it. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, okay. So Jude helps the Kenneteers out, and the four of them go and meet up with their aware school friends who have just been camping on this path, I guess. Anyway, the gang all sort of have a brief huddle as they land back in Kennet, and then everyone goes off to see their mums and Connor. But it's yeah, meetings with the three mums and also Connor, the one out of three dads.
Yay. Um, yeah, I found the vibe in this part upsetting, um, just because they kind of spell it out that sometimes people go through really traumatic shit, and as part of dealing with that, they distance themselves from the people that they like spent time with. And, I think Lucy or, at one point says like, "Okay, we'll talk soon," or like, we will keep in touch. And I was like, "Keep in touch? That's so weird. You're like three teenagers and you live in the same town. What do you mean keep in touch? No one else lives in your town." And then I was like, "Wait, Avery doesn't live in their town." And then I was like, "Wait, Verona doesn't go to their school?"
Yeah.
Like, what if Verona sinks down into Kennet below and Avery just never comes back and Lucy just like goes to school and they never see each other again? And I was like, I can't do this. Um, and it would feel so wrong if, the voiceover of um 45-year-old Lucy comes on and is like, "Yeah, well, I never really saw them again, but friends when you're 14 or friends for blah blah blah." I would just like die. So that can't
Yeah, I know what you mean because I think like again, this is one of those things that feels like we've been talking about for a good chunk of the story is that like you grow apart from your childhood friends often to a degree. And we've seen this in the story. Like, Verona's best friend kind of right now is more Macaulay, right?
Mhm.
Which we'll get to. And like Avery has her friends in Thunder Bay. It's like these three yeah, do feel special, but it's like I'm hoping that we're going for a middle ground because I agree. Like, I don't think my soul could take it if the thing was sort of like that, the Good Boys movie where it was like the lesson is that they had to learn that growing apart was okay. It's like, okay, you guys are allowed to grow apart like a little bit, but like
But you've
you are
already
still
done it
gonna
enough.
have
Like,
yeah, you're still gonna have a very active Facebook group chat between the three of you. That's non-negotiable for me, emotionally. I need to know that the three of you have that. Um,
right. Like I need like them at Christmas again where they like gave each other
yeah.
those really cool presents. Like I need like the three of them like hanging out and friends and not just a scene of like they're all cool at a big party with other people that they're talking to.
Yeah, like it's that's where it feels like it's heading to me is like the story has shown them growing a bit more distant. Like they're not like Verona expresses later on in the chapter that she's worried about them becoming like codependent.
Hmm.
And I think it's hilarious that she thinks that could happen to her. Um, but like yeah, so it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. Like these three aren't going to be glued at the hip forever and ever. The story's been making that clear for arcs and arcs and arcs and arcs now,
Mhm.
but also, yeah, there's a middle ground between being glued at the hip and just seeing each other every handful of holidays. And I'm hoping that where we're heading is something like that, where it's like we can still be friends and be important in each other's lives and maybe be like, maid of honors at each other's wedding or whatever. But also, like, maybe for most of the year, we are only really communicating through voice chat. Um,
Right.
Also, like, let's face it, one of them's Avery. Like, her whole thing is that she's constantly in touch with everyone. That'll be fine.
That's fair. Um, I think at the beginning of this story, with them awakening together, I was like, "Oh, it will be literally impossible for y'all to not be in each other's lives." But we did get in like the familiar text that like sometimes Master and Familiar just like don't have anything to do with each other really, and
Hmm.
there are ways to make yeah, there are ways that they could conceivably not really be around each other, which it just seems wild that that's possible with their power being tied to Kenneth and all these things. But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Avery's sort of had the official ambassador position. Like, there are ways to work around it, I guess. But
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know. It also just feels very pale to me that it's like a little bit more complicated than just they're super best friends together forever,
Right.
and or they grow apart. Like Pale tends to be a little bit more interested in like discarding the extremes, like the simple extremes, and like putting in the work to build something a little bit more complicated but
Hmm.
ultimately better.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'm very fascinated to sort of see where the rest go in this regard. Like especially, this chapter sets up Avery and Verona. Are we going to keep getting pairs of Kenneteers? Like, because there's a lot of overlap in Avery and Verona's segments in this. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm so excited to find out
Ooh.
where we go from here.
That would be interesting in terms of like their intersections as friends and people and practitioners. Like, was there something about this epilogue that was particularly like Kenneth lost or Kenneth found or whatever? Like, we start on a path, Avery's like super lost. Um, we get Verona thinking about big toothpick bubblegum, fuck you,
Yeah,
like practice moments. Um, and maybe because I was thinking when we got to Verona's part, I was like, oh, and we'll get Lucy's too, and then we didn't, and I was like, is this
yeah.
because we're not ready for the emotional train wreck that is going to be Lucy and Jasmine speaking to each
Yeah, that needs a whole
other?
chapter probably. Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking the same thing, and it feels like too early to zoom in on it for me. But I had the same thought where I was like, okay, like, is this the kind of Kenneth found epilogue because that's like the Verona and Avery overlap, and there is some stuff like they're both navigating awkward relationship, kind of refinding their place in Kenneth, which feels
Hmm.
very on brand for the Lost stuff.
Hmm.
Like the two of them have called out before how like Kenneth found stuff is the games and things, but it's also the like um disconnection and isolation sort of stuff, and
Hmm.
both of them kind of have to navigate, particularly through their mums,
Hmm.
like finding their place. So I could see, yeah, like if next epilogue was Verona and Lucy, and it felt a bit more Kenneth Belowy, which was a bit more about like the struggle of the rebuild or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see depending on where it goes from here.
Right.
Um, I guess to focus in on Avery though, very specifically, like I do love how this early part of her chapter really establishes how restless she is.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's constantly wanting to move around. Like she's still in this mindset she's been in for like so long in the story, where there was just constantly a million things to do, and sitting still feels like she's doing something wrong. Like it's this
Mm.
unhealthy side of her arrivals and departures, which is like she feels like this pressure to always be arriving and departing, and she can't really sit still. And now she's like, there is nowhere to go, and also she's not in a state to go anywhere.
Mm.
But she's still struggling with that at this point in the chapter. And I think that the chapter does a great job at establishing that, like even right down to like she keeps trying to sort of solve this path, or like she's just pointing out stuff, and it's like Avery, like Jude's like, yeah, it's cool. We're thinking about that. We'll look into it later, but like you don't need to solve the symbols on the backs of these sky whales right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard to turn yourself or it can be hard to turn things off. It
Yeah,
can be really hard to relax after you've had like a super long day or long week or whatever. And I relate to this a lot, but it is an interesting
yeah,
example too of like kind of early story Avery. And I mean, I guess we see like she's still the same person, she still has these problems, but she's also like developed ways to kind of
yeah,
deal with it more. Um, as a fun, I mean, not just a little summation of
yeah.
Avery's character growth we get
And I
in
think
this
there's a lot of
chapter.
that for both of the girls in this chapter.
Hmm.
But yeah, I like how the start of this chapter does a good mindset of kind of putting Avery in a similarly bad spot to where we saw her at like the start of the story,
Mhm.
um, by lumping on just just this shitload of context that's just happened, and it's a bit like, okay, she's like, yeah, like at risk of backsliding, but we're going to see why she won't
Mhm.
in a bit. Also, just before we move on from this section, like again, even in the epilogues, Walbo's just seemingly without trying creating awesome new paths and characters and lore, and I'm just like so sad to see this world disappear. Um, like this little detail we get about the Garrick who used this place, but he didn't use the letters that were the wrong way around, so now he's like stuck in a mirror version of the world, and it's just like who. Like I don't know, being stuck in the mirror, like mirrors like that, sounds awful. Like I can't imagine dealing with that.
It was viscerally upsetting, especially when they were like, "And we sent him back, and it, like, flipped all these other things, and it still hasn't worked," and, like, it's just like, what else is that doing to
Yeah.
his being? Um, like, is he gonna get cancer or something because, like, he just his body can't? I don't know.
Um,
Uh,
I worry like like what happens to him like if he played cricket or whatever, I don't know, baseball right-handed, and it's like, is he now goofy? Like
oh.
is he now left-handed? Like does he have to relearn how to play tennis, like
I'm sure that's the biggest problem.
I mean
I
he's
mean,
learning
couldn't
how to reread and rewrite, but like does he have to learn to write with his other hand? Like has
no, like,
anyway.
we're enlightened now. Like, you can you know, you can be left-handed. I mean, I guess
No, but
if
is he left-handed? Like that's what I'm like. His stuff got like because like writing like as somebody who's kind of ambi, like writing with my left hand is different to writing with my right. So
mm,
like it could be confused for him. Like he maybe, yeah, I don't know.
right, is it just his brain that's flipped, or is it his whole
Yeah,
being?
where does it end?
It's fun. It's a fun horror thing to think about.
um, but yeah. Anyway, I guess getting back to the story, Avery has gotten home, but she's still feeling a bit lost. Sheridan does her best to bring a familiar form of shit stirring to the table, but it's not enough, and Avery's still not really able to click with her family. And I think this is also greatly established by the first thing she sees from her family is Declan kind of coming around the corner calling her an arsehole. Like, I mean, he's not wrong. She took Snowdrop. It's a very fair accusation, but um, I don't know. It's just like sort of from the get go, like the first person she sees and hears from is Declan, and you're just like, oh, this isn't good.
I was so confused. Like, I I was like, "Are you mad because, like, everyone was worried about
Yeah.
Avery? Like, why are you, like, saying like, why are you calling her these names? Like, why is no one stopping him? Like, is what?" Like, I was super thrown off, and then when it was like, "Snowdrop," I was like, "Oh my god." Fuck off. Like, no. Ugh.
It's so funny.
Ugh.
Um, like Declan has a bunch of moments in this chapter where you just like you can see how he's inching towards not being a complete piece of shit. Like I love the moment where he's kind of talking about Snowdrop's ears, and I think the mum or dad is like, "Oh, it's good that you're caring about stuff like that, Declan." And Declan's like, "Yeah, better than Avery." And it was like, okay, well, baby steps, you know. He still managed to turn it into being shitty to Avery that he cared, but at least he's starting.
I thought it was interesting later, just kind of Avery's like, "Yeah, maybe we should look into, like, awakening Declan," and I was like, "That's wild, but also, he might love it, but we should wait till he's, like, 17? Like, let's all calm down."
See, I don't know. I feel like exposure and a lot of time with more diverse people like others might be the best way to fix him. Like, especially if you like start him with some of the Kennet goblins, so he's like, that
Uh,
would be like an easy transition, I think, for him from like goblin
his friends.
shenanigans. Yeah.
I was thinking just in terms of, like, actually awakening him, like, let's
Oh yeah,
we
yeah.
can
Wait for
awaken
that,
him
but
in
Yes, yeah.
a couple years, but um maybe let's not have him actually running around on paths for a while, or at least not, I don't know,
With a
as the person.
chaperone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think, like, particularly Avery's family are going to look at, like, hopefully after Sheridan doing much more of a, like, build up towards awakening, if that makes sense. Like, you should spend a few years aware before it's like the decision is made on whether to awaken you. And I
Mm.
think a lot of big practitioner families do already do it like that. But they do it in the shit way. But, like, they're not wrong that it's like you should spend years training as an aware before it's decided whether you can awaken. Just without all the old Mossa family bullshit tied into that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's even much of a question. I guess, like, what are they called? I was gonna say doppelgangers, that's not right. The people who can lie are useful to have around, but it seems like with the Hennegers and the Mussers and, like, all these families, like, everyone awakens. And, like, if you can't cut it, tough.
I mean, everyone we hear about, like, if they've got filchers out back, they just probably
I was
don't
gonna
talk
say
about
that
them.
maybe there's some squibs. Yeah.
Um,
Blackguard,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Sorry.
um, yeah, I don't know. Like, yeah, I'm almost coming at it more from the perspective of, like, Kenneth is much more aware of how, especially right now, being a practitioner is a bit of a privileged position. And I think
Mm.
it should be okay to set up a scenario where, like, not everyone gets to do it. Like, you can flunk out of police academy. Um, here in Australia, you have to do, like, I think it's like 3 years of training before you can become a police officer. And I know people who have not made it through that program.
Well,
Um, and that's a good system because not everyone is cut out to be a police officer. And ours,
right.
there's still a lot of changes I'd like to make to the police situation down here, but, like, as with all things, even if we're far from perfect, we're doing better than the States. So yeah.
I do I do think that um a potential problem is, like, how do you effectively control that or, like, stop people? Because, like, with the police academy, you just, like, you don't give them a badge, like, you don't hire them, like,
I see
sorry.
what you mean. Yeah.
But being a practitioner, like, they could get books and figure it out and fuck themselves over. Um, but also I think having alternative paths that are not like, "You are ashamed to your family now because we decided you can't practice," but yeah, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Like, and maybe there's the difference between awakening versus, like, getting access to Kenneth's power, right? Like, the weird thing for the Kenneters is
Mm,
they were immediately tapped into Kenneth's power source, whereas maybe Kenneth switches to more of a, like, people can sign up as practitioners of Kenneth and they get access to that same power usage, and that's what's locked behind a, like, don't be a dickhead training regime.
Does I mean, we didn't see Sheridan's awakening ritual, but presumably she doesn't have the Kennet juice, right?
No, I assume not. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, maybe she'll earn it, I guess. I do. I really love how Sheridan turns this conversation into talking about her, like, uh, you know, pubic debut as a practitioner. Because it's like Avery is really struggling to talk to her parents, and you can kind of tell that Sheridan is picking up on that
Mhm,
and is, like, trying to joke to, like, make the whole conversation a little bit less stilted, and it doesn't
mhm.
quite work. But it's like, I don't know, she's trying, and, like, I think it kind of works with Connor because it's not long after that Connor starts just kind of telling Avery to call Nora, which is, like, the smartest thing anyone in this chapter says.
Uh-huh,
Um, and, like, Connor is really the one who's like, Avery, go to bed and call Nora. But, like, and then Avery sort of brushes that off and he's like, no, go call Nora. It's like,
right.
yeah. Um, like, it's like those little moments with Sheridan and Connor are, like, sort of the light and the darkness of this awkward ass conversation with her parents.
Yeah. Um, I was really thrown by, like, first Declan is, like, yelling at her and calling her an asshole, and no one's really stopping that. And then, like, she's not immediately embraced by her parents, and maybe she, like, I mean, I guess she probably has a whole bunch of cuts all over her, but like my mom wouldn't care.
Yeah.
It seems like it would be really beneficial to herself to get a hug, like that grounding, but it's just like weird and awkward and tense. And
Yep.
like I'm expecting this from like Jasmine, I guess, who may be like super pissed that this has happened. And I guess that's like Connor and Kelsey might also be kind of feeling that. But I think I was
See,
thrown by the
I
whole vibe.
think I feel like Jasmine's energy, she's gonna hug Lucy, and if Lucy's like, this hurts, Jasmine's gonna be like, I don't give a fuck, like, serves you right. Like we've seen, I'm thinking of that time Jasmine punished Booker for being hungover by like using the blender when he was in the room. Like, I feel like Jasmine's energy is very much like, if it
Oh
hurts
shit.
for you to hug me, suck eggs, I'm getting my hug. Like, good. Um
Right, you did this.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah. Like Jasmine will see that as a perk, frankly. Um Whereas, yeah, like you're right. Avery is constantly talking about how there's like 15 feet of distance between her and her family, is what it feels like. Like there's none of that like family intimacy. That's a bad word for it, but like like there's none of the family bondage.
Yep.
Um,
Totally a normal
yeah.
phrase. The Yeah, and so this part of the chapter also kind of freaked me out. Like I was really happy, like I because Sheridan is kind of like, what's my place here? What am I doing? And she slowly gets back in that, I am Avery's sister. I make fun of her.
Yeah,
Like this is gonna be good and fine or whatever. Um, but yeah, it felt really off. And I wasn't sure how
yeah,
much
it
of it is
does.
like Avery being lost and how much of it is like her parents are kind of fucking up.
It's pale. It's both.
It's
I think.
both.
Like it's like Avery's lostness is a thing, but it's also that is also tied into the fact that she's been not really connecting with her family for a while. Like this has been a thing that's been building up for quite a while in the story, that she's kind of been neglecting her family connections, and so it's like those two things aren't separate in this universe. It's like, yeah, it's her lostness is the fact that she's just not really been tied to her parents for a while now, and that's why this like uh, uh, neither of them seem very sure how to like reestablish that connection.
Yeah, I think I thought that it had been getting better because, she'd taken her parents on pass. They met the Garricks. Like, it's obviously not like I'm super okay with everything Avery's doing, but I I expected them to be more on board or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like, what a great challenge to Lob at Avery that they're kind of not, and it's like you can see in this scene how easy it would be for it to just get awkward and for her to start just slipping away.
Mhm.
Um, in other news, one of the things Avery mentions, I didn't realize the Carmine was stuck in the Crucible as well. I thought the deal they cut meant the Carmine got out, but like, so the Aurum and the Carmine are now just stuck in this little dump. Um, I don't know. That's funny,
Yeah.
and it's interesting for this region now that it's only really got two judges.
Yeah. I sort of figured they were just wrestling in there forever. Uh Although maybe they
I thought
can.
the deal they cut with Ryan was to get the Carmine off his ass.
Maybe. Yeah. Um
Anyway, I mean, maybe they're just stuck in there for a couple of months or something. I guess we'll see. But I mean, I'm not upset by this development. It's just not how I thought it was working.
Right. I mean, I think keeping the Carmine kind of away is probably good for most things. Just in terms of
Yeah,
like not having the mindless judge of like violence and stuff hanging around.
I'm still saying Gashwad. Gashwad's right there as a replacement gang.
He's the best.
He wants to be more violent, and what better way for him to achieve that than becoming the new Carmine?
Yeah.
Also, especially with the sword moot, it feels like the Carmine's job now is really just to like make sure the sword moot isn't becoming corrupt. And I feel like
Mm.
Gashwad would love to be a pain in the ass of all these
Bitch
practitioners.
practitioners.
Yeah.
uh, yes. Um, Another thing about this conversation with the parents that's kind of interesting that we also see with Verona later is like she's not like, "Oh yeah, I was almost forsworn and totally fucked." Like
Yeah.
I feel like I would want to tell, like, maybe not immediately, maybe I wouldn't be down to like talk about how traumatizing that is right away, but I feel like I would want to tell my mom that that had happened, especially when we're we seem to be pretty like that's not the immediate concern. But and like Verona also doesn't bring it up with Sylvia, which I guess kind of makes sense. Like Sylvia wouldn't even really know what that meant. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm just sort of like, is Lucy gonna tell Jasmine? Uh, or are we just
But
not ever?
technically, Lucy never got to that point because she started the duel with Charles
Yeah, but she
that was
knew that that was
before
what
her
was happening,
forswearing.
you know? And it
But I
was
mean,
only
you
a
know,
matter of
technically,
like postponing.
yeah, but she didn't get that far. That's what I'm saying. She can honestly say to her mom, Charles never started forswearing me, uh, because that was being postponed. So, I mean, there's nothing to tell. Um,
Fascinating.
I mean, God, Lucy might get shot by her mom if she tries to pull that, and then Jasmine finds out. Um, but yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm very excited to see from if we don't get a Lucy POV in the next epilogue, I'm going to be quite upset.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I guess sticking with Avery, she takes her dad's advice and she does call Nora. Something that makes her feel so good that she literally starts to sparkle. Because Kerry has been in her bed and is proving to be a great wing woman. Yeah, I mean, this is the point where things start to turn around for Avery. Basically, this call with Nora.
Right, we've seen how this has been really helpful for Avery in the past, how with Nora she can stop moving. Um, and we've seen these calls, with these video calls be really good.
Mm,
Um, and it's really nice that like their relationship has been rocky, but Nora, immediately wants to talk to her and wants to see her and just like that felt really gratifying and
yes.
in a way that like the rest of this chapter hasn't been. Like that
Yeah.
felt like reassuring. That's the word. Even though it's funny, Avery I think said like, "Hey, can you talk right now?" or something, and Nora's like, "You just said we need to talk," and I'm like, "No, she didn't." Like please chill. Like I know that your relationship has been, a little bit not the best, but she did not just
I
we need to talk you. Are you about to
She did
disagree?
though. I'm
No,
I'm
she
on Nora's
didn't.
side on this. And honestly, that's not a good look for Nora because my healthiness in relationships is Brett tier. But like, yeah,
But it's
I
like,
had
I
the
want to
same
talk
like
to you. Are you free?
yeah, but like after not talking for ages and I want to talk to you, like
It's been
that's
like
not
24
that
hours,
it's so
right?
formal. It's so formal, Malia.
What?
It's
Okay.
it's like yeah. I don't know if I've told this story on this podcast, but like I got one of these from my ex when we'd only been dating for like a month, and I went through the same thing as Nora. And it turns out she just wanted to meet because she wanted to tell me that her friends found my Bebo account, which I did
You're
not think was a can we talk level emergency, but
you're
um, Bebo was like a Facebook ripoff. I don't know. It was big in my high school.
huh, okay.
I think it's dead now. But it was like between MySpace and Facebook
Huh,
for us
okay.
anyway. But yeah, it was basically she found her friends found my social media profile because we've been dating for a month, and she decided that she needed to text me, "Can we meet in this coffee shop?" to tell me that. And
Yeah,
I
no,
was worried.
that's wild.
Anyway, I think Nora is completely reasonable for thinking the same thing. With all they've been through, and then just we need to talk, that's too formal. It's
She didn't
scary.
say that.
I mean, she pretty much did though. It was like, can
No.
we talk? That's the same thing.
Ugh,
Like, can
whatever.
we talk sounds serious?
Fair.
Um,
Fine. I don't know.
no, no, I think I mean it's funny because this is like a genuine miscommunication. It's funny how like I've been in like a newish long distance relationship before, And there were honestly a few lines that were like almost direct lifted from those to the point where I was like, has Wilbur hacked my DMs? Um, because this felt so genuinely like a new awkward long distance relationship. I love the part in particular where like Avery is kind of so tired she doesn't really respond to what Nora's saying because she's too busy thinking about how great it is. So then Nora assumes she said something wrong. Um, like I've been in that exact interaction before, and then Avery has to do the thing where she's like, no, sorry, I'm sorry. I like it's great. Like Walbo has just such an uncanny ability to nail the vibes of this sort of thing.
Yes. Uh, the chat seems to be on your side.
I mean, we need to talk would be worse, but yeah, I don't know. Also, I guess like I thought it was funny that like I can see why Nora got even worse when Avery was kind of refusing to show her face. Um, even though we know it's
Hmm.
because Avery looks like a fucking mess right now. But yeah.
um, but yeah, the glitter was fun. I thought that there was some sort of like residual glamour, like
Yeah.
they have a supply somehow, and like something, and I was like all excited, and then it was like, no, it's Carrie. It's literal glitter.
A part of me was like started to panic. I was like, fuck, if is this Brisbane? Like I thought this was the epilogues and now we're doing conflict, and then it was like, oh no, it's just Carrie being a fucking little sister. It was so funny. Um
I
yeah.
think Tommy B really wants us to point out that this could be just that Carrie misses Avery so much that she was sleeping in her bed and not like
Oh yeah.
just being a jerk with glitter.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie has been I do again. Carrie doesn't quite get that much attention in this chapter, and I was like, I felt a bit. I guess she's got Snowdrop now, is the point, and it worked for Avery. But like, Carrie has been literally begging for attention for a lot of this story, and hopefully she's going to start getting it.
Mhm.
I do really, really love this as this like outro for this part of Avery's story too, because the phone call with Nora kind of gets distracted as Avery has to head downstairs to like get involved in the Kelly family chaos, and it's just like this perfect end for this part of Avery's story because she goes down there, she voices her complaints, and her parents hear her and say they're going to act on it, which is like that's what was missing at the start of the story is she didn't have a voice in her own family. Like it feels directly contrasted to like the whole thing with the TV show and the um fucking singing show that was on the TV where Avery would get outvoted by her family. Like, but almost
Right.
more importantly, it's not special. Like the downstairs conversation earlier was like this special, more adult thing with Avery. This is not that. Like as Avery's making this complaint, Kerry is screaming about bras. Sheridan's making fun of Avery. Declan's being a piece of shit. Like she's just a part of the family in this moment. It almost means more that it's like everyone else is yelling and screaming over Avery making this comment about how she needs boundaries. It's so good.
And there is something about how, yeah, like at the start of the story, the Kelly family shenanigans were really a drain. And
Yeah.
it's lovely that, I mean, things have changed. The parents have learned and adjusted their dynamics, but like, you know, Carrie hasn't really changed. Sheridan's not
No.
that different. Declan is still pretty much the same, but like her siblings.
Rowan is also not really a thing. Like he's a fly on the
Right,
wall.
Rowan is maybe there, maybe not. But like they her siblings give her life now. Um
Yeah.
and that's really great. And like was one of the most hopeful parts of this. I think
Yeah.
was of the Avery chapter was like, oh no, she's gonna be okay. Like
Yeah, because it's this weird moment where the hugeness of this moment is because it's not actually that huge, but it's not like Avery didn't have to make a big deal out of defining a boundary like this. It almost means more that like she gets to say this and gets heard amongst all the other regular chaotic bullshit that is her family. Um And like the cherry on top is that her girlfriend is listening on the phone, and like, yeah, like I don't know, like it. Avery's story was like about more than like she needed to end up with a girlfriend. Like obviously, like she's been through this whole journey where she kind of found herself before finding a girlfriend.
Uh-huh.
But it like if we're focusing on connections, like I guess that's the word I'd associate with lost path found energy is like connections. And if this is like
Mm.
the focusing on those close connections kind of found epilogue, it's like it's so good for Avery that she sort of got this connection to Nora now, and she didn't need it, but she wanted it, and she's got a good, healthy one now, and it's just so nice that like, yeah, as well as all this shit with her family, she was also getting listened to by Nora.
Yeah. Yeah. She was. That's nice.
Um, and then also, she manages to twist that into like finding her peace by like realizing that her goal now is to get build Kenneth back into somewhere where that she can bring Nora and her siblings into it. And like it's
Mhm.
this perfect thing of like her restlessness had come from she didn't know how to work with goals. Oh, my interpretation is Avery was like getting stressed out because she was so used to having immediate goals in front of her that required like stressful interaction, and like she was kind of falling apart from the fact that it was like there was nothing immediate drawing her attention, which meant she didn't like have a goal. She didn't know what she was doing, and now that she's managed to find a goal for herself that isn't like stressful, and
Mm.
that's what like closes out this segment, sort of closes out this part of the story for Avery. Is like she's found these connections and she's found something to work forward towards that doesn't, I don't know, drain her.
Mhm.
It's just, yeah, I don't know, such a great like ending to a lot of what Avery's been dealing with.
Yeah. It's exciting.
Yeah. Um, and I guess, yeah, speaking of, we go another 3 hours ahead, into Verona's head. Verona's head. There's a rhyme there. But yeah, Verona is assessing the damage to her domain, and she's just sort of beginning the cleanup when her mum arrives.
Yeah. Her house is fucked.
Yeah,
um it's I guess it reminds me of after her dad's house burned down and her standing there. And also like when her domain was new, but it's more
yeah,
hopeful than either of those because like she has more control over this space than she did when her domain was new, and it's not just like let's all stare at this like husk shell of a life that I'm abandoning. It's like, okay, that sucks, but we can make it work. And I have, my weird pigeon friends and other friends, and even Raquel's here, and it's we're gonna pull it together. And that was great.
yeah. I really like the call out about how she still sort of has better control over her domain than she used to, because it's this thing where it's like, yeah, the house is fucked, but it's like there's almost this found like this strong foundation like she's built,
Mm,
and because this has been a big thing for Verona's story is like her constantly feeling like she builds things and then they get destroyed and it kind of puts her back to square one or further behind.
mm,
And what's so great about this is it doesn't feel like that, like because she goes straight from here to looking at Kenneth below, and that's like the other thing that she was building and it's kind of been decimated.
mhm,
But the vibe of both Kenneth below and her house is she's like looking at it and it's like everything's gone, but she can sort of see the foundation and the path forward now. And so as fucked
mm.
up as it all is, it's like not throwing like destroying her momentum like that sort of thing used to.
Right. That's yeah, that's a good point. Um, I don't know. She's just so great, and
Yeah.
I didn't expect her to be this okay. I
Yeah, I
guess
know.
circling back to something with Avery that I forgot that I wanted to talk about was like when she's talking to her parents about the experience and how awful it was, she says like I had to be mean. And I think that was so damaging to her. Um
Yeah.
and Verona had to run and she hates that. But I don't think there was anything like as damaging to Verona's like psyche and self as Avery telling Charles that he was like a complete piece of shit and didn't deserve anything, which is just what really didn't feel very Avery like. And then,
Mm.
Lucy and some of the trauma she experienced in terms of like experiencing her child die and herself die and all those like weird things
Yeah.
um that I'm interested in. And like how what Charles said about them like not being real or whatever like really got to Lucy. Like Verona was like, I don't care. Like she had to run. She made like a heroic lineage. Um she, you know, kicked ass and like fought and like didn't give up or give in. And so I think that it kind of makes sense that even though she's coming back to a destroyed house, like it's still her house. She still has magic control over it, and like she's psyched. She's ready to take on more bullshit. Um,
Yeah, well, I think like because her stuff almost came a bit earlier than the others. Like for her, it was losing Kennet below and then losing
right,
her domain, which was
right.
like immediately before the Crucible almost. But yeah, yeah, she maybe has had a bit more time, but I think yeah, it's just like in much the same way we see that like Avery is doing better because she's able to like voice her needs to her parents and like navigate all these new things. So like yeah, like the being mean, it was like she now has these people who she can say that, and Connor's just immediately like, hey, you have a good heart, and like get on the call with Nora to remind yourself of that. And for Verona, it's like she lost all the stuff she was building, I think is her equivalent, like, and that includes
Mm,
Kenneth Below and her friendships with like Mal and Anselm and stuff. But like the through line of this epilogue chunk for her is this like it's all gone, but like there's foundations there, and she sees the path forward, and that's what she didn't used to be able to do, is like know that she could rebuild something better.
right. And I think that it's like she got a little bit of like it possibly an interaction with some semblance of like Mal and Ansem in the Crucible, and she's we got to
Yeah,
see that Kennet below wasn't going to like immediately disintegrate, like they saved that. So I think that like the parts that really were devastating to Verona happened um yeah, before
yeah,
this last fight. And I guess yeah, with her domain, I don't know if I was reading that chapter so fast or whatever, but I just kind of figured like Charles had hurt some of the house and it was going to be fine as long as Verona lived. Um but like yeah,
nope.
with Avery and Lucy, it's more recent damage that
Yeah,
they haven't had a chance to deal with yet.
yeah, yeah, true. um I think like I guess the other reason like am focusing on this a bit is like I think there's a lot of direct inversions to a lot of the first chapters that we had with the Kenneteers. Like, I think you can very specifically draw lines between, well, 1.1, which is the first Verona chapter, and this one here.
Mm,
Um, like, very specifically, her hair comes up later as like one of the big things we were introduced to Verona through in 1.1 was that she wanted her hair to stop growing. And
right.
here we have this moment where it is growing, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to try some new styles because I'm growing and I know that I want to grow into something different. And that's just like so different to like, yeah, where she was at the start of the story, where she was like, no hair grow, me not be human. Um, and like, I think another fun one is we open this epilogue with Verona in the domain already, kind of bemoaning the fact that she can't do much of the repairs herself because her body is like broken.
Mm.
Um, and it's like she's here and she wants to do what is, let's face it, going to be a tedious, long ass chore. Um, and she's annoyed that she can't do it. And that's like such a fun inversion of the Verona we met at the start of the story, who was like, we kind of met her in 1.1 and she was doing chores, but for a reason. And then when that didn't work, she was very anti chores. And it's like, here she is wanting to do physical labor and annoyed she can't.
That is very fun. Um, with you bringing up the hair now, I don't know what exactly it's a testament to or how he does this, but there's something about, like, I don't think Verona's hair has come up in quite a while. Um, but when she says, like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna let it grow out or whatever, like, that just, like, hit me so hard, like, I knew immediately,
Yeah.
like, what that meant and what that signified, and, like, it was also like, oh, it's nice that Sylvia even recognizes that, like, Verona's hair, because I think she had, like, helped her pick out the style or something, like, that was really important and that she remembered
Mm,
that, but then, like, the scissors were her item in the awakening ritual, like, it was just, like, a huge thing that hasn't come up in a very long time, but, 3 years later is still a thing that I, as a reader, remember, um, and that
true.
was
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, just how many things from the start of the story are coming back and showing how far they've come is really cool.
Yeah, and there were a lot in the Avery chapter as well that we didn't call out too explicitly, but like if you go back and read more 1.4, which is technically the second Avery chapter, but like it's like you said, like her family's chaos is so draining for Avery there, and then we come to this epilogue and it's the opposite. Like Avery's longing for it and thrives on it when it finally happens. Like, yeah. Um it's also obviously like there's a lot of differences in Sylvia and Brett. Like Brett is the parent we meet in 1.1. Sylvia is the parent we have in this epilogue, and they're obviously quite
Mm,
different people.
mhm,
Um, and I love how Sylvia manages to actually, like, there's this bit where Sylvia arrives and Verona's like, "This is my house. Charles wrecked it." And Sylvia starts talking about like some other bullshit, and Verona just repeats herself. She's like, "It's my house, and Charles wrecked it." And Sylvia actually engages with her,
mhm.
and I was like, "Oh wow!" It only took a second try for Sylvia to actually hear her. Like, I remember crow humping toads took like 10 goes at least. Um, so I was kind of like, yeah, it's this really hopeful PB for Sylvia that I was like, wow, it only took her two tries to actually listen to her daughter. That's progress.
Yeah, I this is another one where I found the parent frustrating and lacking, but I guess in the same way that, like, Connor and Kelsey are more on board by the end of Avery's section, Sylvia, like, very explicitly in this section reaffirms, like, "No, I'm here, I'm staying in Kennet, like, I'm here
Yeah,
with you," um, which was great, and yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know, I like the cheesy epilogue of, like, "And then everything was great," but it's not as satisfying, and thinking, "Oh, the story's not over," like, their lives aren't over,
yeah,
there's still chances to do things is good. Um,
yeah. Like these two are still. Wait, you're right. This epilogue is sort of like, okay, things with Sylvia and Verona are good and they're moving forward, but like they're not. Like it's still going to be work for those
mhm,
two to kind of find the groove, is what it feels like.
mhm.
Um, but we should also talk about, because their awkward mummy daughter time is broken as Macaulay arrives with Juliet and also Soot Sleeves, who puts her army to work.
Woo. Um, I really missed Macaulay.
I know.
It was really good seeing her and Verona, and it's funny thinking back to, like, the BHI or whatever and being like, "Oh, that's a girl with a weird name," and, like, she's, like, Verona's best friend now, and that's
Yeah,
fun. Um
she wasn't just the girl with the weird. She was like weirdly violent. Like one of the first times we really saw her was when she was in Ray's office for like assaulting another student. Like,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, good times. But yeah,
But now I mean, she's
tech
so good in this segment too. So it's worth calling out. Like
mhm,
she is such a good emotional support for Verona here. Like this segment kind of ends with Macaulay being like, "Go talk to your mom," and like
mhm.
that's such a big thing for like either Macaulay or Verona to sort of like being like, "Hey, go be with your parent." Like, um, yeah, everything about Macaulay in this section, I was just like, when did you become such a fucking awesome therapist? For very specifically Verona, but like, yeah.
Right, and even when Verona's sort of saying, like, "I don't know, I don't wanna be, like, all up in Verona and in Lucy and Avery's space or whatever,"
Yeah.
and she's like, "Okay, if they needed your help, would you go to them?" And Verona's like, "Yeah," and she's like,
Mhm.
"Okay." Like, and Verona it's just yeah, I don't know, it's great. Um
It's so good. Yeah, I love how even Verona has to be like, yeah, okay, I guess that would because like there's a few moments in this chapter where Verona is very much like worried that she's bratting,
mhm.
and WLP and like yeah, Macaulay and Sylvia just spent all of this segment of the chapter being like, no, and like demonstrating why not. Like I love how Macaulay is able to logic Verona out of like, you would not be being a drag on those two because they would do the same for you. It's fine.
Mhm.
In fact, they're so good here. One of the things Macaulay calls out is that she wants a new last name, and then we immediately pivot from that to Macaulay looking at it and being like, "Otto, what's happened to our home?" And I was like, "Okay, so Sylvia is adopting Macaulay. That's what's happening, right? We're getting, I mean, I guess Haywood, Macaulay Haywood. I'm so
And
ready
she
for these
doesn't
two to actually be sisters."
people were saying or I feel like I saw something about speculating about changing the name and the spirits and stuff, but maybe she could just yeah, she could be Macaulay H. Like, she
Yeah,
doesn't have to change her initials.
change it legally so she's Macaulay Haywood or whatever, and then I think that helps with the spirits. But yeah, maybe she's Macaulay H for a while. I love that. Um, Also, the one funny moment with Macaulay here is like there's a lot of talk about the alchemy lab, and we have to be very careful around that because you don't want to get gilkied, and that makes a lot of sense. But Macaulay is like, "Oh, I can try and handle that because I'm basically immortal." Um, and I thought Macaulay's immortality had a lot to do with like like her screaming, right? Like she does some of the Henniger scream stuff. So I just couldn't help but picture her like bending over and picking up these beakers as she's like screaming at them to make sure they can't hurt her. Like, is like what was her plan here?
I mean, that sounds awesome.
Like, you just imagine her like she moves a piece of wood and sees some like suspect broken shards of glass, so she just screams as she bends down to pick them up.
Better safe than sorry, I guess.
um, I also thought it was fascinating. Gillette calls Sylvia Verona's mum, um, which I don't know why. I feel like Gillette refers to Brett as her dad as well. So I thought it was interesting that like Gillette sees Brett more as her dad, but Sylvia is very much Verona's mum. Especially because I mean, Gillette was made before Sylvia was really properly a part of Verona's life, but that's just like I continue to be fascinated by Gillette's concept of personhood and self, and it is really interesting that Sylvia is definitely not her mum, and she doesn't seemingly have any interest in Sylvia being her mum.
Yeah, I wonder if part of it is that a big role that Gillette had early in her existence was
Yeah,
interacting with Brett,
Brett
uh,
time. Yeah, yeah,
right?
100%.
And like Sylvia, people are pointing out the cat carrier in the chat, which was really funny, and I'd forgotten about it. Um, but yeah, like Gillette didn't interact with Sylvia, I don't think.
No, but I mean, the thing is, Verona kind of didn't either. But like, Verona has wanted more from her mum for a long while, like enough that I would have thought Gillette could have picked up on that at some point. But like, yeah, it wasn't written into her construction. I guess I just like it, I think it's really interesting that Gillette doesn't seemingly want a mum, whereas Verona has very
mm,
clearly kind of wanted something like this for a while. Like, and that's one of those interesting differences between Gillette and Verona that I'd love to dive way deeper into in the story.
mhm, yes. Um, they're fascinating.
um, but yeah, anyway, Macaulay helps convince Verona to talk more with her mum. So Verona takes Sylvia on a trip of all the premium rentals that are up for grabs in Kennet Below because, uh, you know, there's a lot of vacancies right now. But yeah, mostly the pair really talk about what they're going to look like going forward as a mummy daughter, relationship.
Yeah, and yeah, this is part of where Sylvia really says, like, "Yeah, I'm not leaving. Like, I'm here."
Yeah.
Like, and it's so interesting how they like, how their relationship is, and, like, it's like a, "Oh, maybe, like, we'll eat breakfast together or something," which is just, like, not the standard, like, parent-child relationship, especially when the kid is not an
Yeah.
adult. And like, because thinking like this is not a conversation Avery and Kelsey would ever have. And
No,
probably
no.
not even, like Jasmine Lucy. And it's just such a fascinating, like Verona has her house and like, is she gonna stay with Sylvia sometimes? Like, is Sylvia like there's never a question that Sylvia would like live in the domain, I don't think. And I don't know, it's fascinating. Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, this has been a thing that I think the story has been sort of commenting on for a while. Is like Verona needed like a parent, but I think we've really been dissecting what the concept of parent means, particularly through Verona. Like, Verona did
Mhm.
not need a traditional mum or especially a traditional dad, whereas like, Lucy has been running around all story trying to figure out what male role model figures look like for her.
Uh-huh.
And she's gone through about half the cast of the story figuring that out. Um, Verona has very much like come at parental relationships in a very different, like, she wants something, yeah, non-standard. And what's fun about Sylvia is Sylvia only really has the capacity to provide something fairly non-standard.
Mhm.
Um, and what I think is fun about that is the huge change we see in Verona here compared to early in the story is Verona's ability and willingness to voice what she's after. And like, she doesn't even fully know, but she's like, I think I need like a tether to humanity, and like, this is the sort of stuff I need. And it's like, it's almost weirdly closer to a business negotiation in terms of them talking about what Sylvia will provide to Verona as a parent.
Mm.
But that's kind of what both of them need.
Mhm.
And yeah, like, it's just so huge for Verona that she's able to express that. I see Verona as a character as very much her. One of her big things has always been that she never fits the traditional mold. Like, I feel like part of how Walbo approaches designing character traits for Verona is he thinks, okay, what is the standard, and how do I do the opposite of that?
Hmm.
Um, and like, now we're sort of seeing, or early in the story, that meant that she never really knew how to express her needs and her wants because all the language is built around the norms. And she's kind of pushed past that, and now her and Sylvia can have this weird conversation about what their parent-child relationship is going to be. That's
Mhm.
very, as you said, not normal. Like, but kind of what she needs. She's now able to express her needs.
Yeah. It it's a little disappointing in that it still does feel like Verona is more of an adult in the situation than she needs to be or something, but also like she
Yeah,
knows more
that
about what
ship has
she
sailed.
wants, right, and what she needs. And the fact that Sylvia is catching up to that is good. And maybe someday
Yeah.
Sylvia can take over more of a parenting role in whatever way that works for them as opposed to like playing catch up. But yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think what's also really interesting about their relationship is it feels somewhat more bi-directional than a traditional parental relationship. Like, as much as Sylvia has been asked to come here to provide stuff for Verona,
Mhm.
like, the other half of it is Verona has also kind of invited her here because she's like, I really want you to get into this and start to treat me like one of your adult friends. Like, she wants to be the person that Sylvia sits down for a meal with and is fascinated by all the crazy shit she's doing. Um, and so it's like, as much as Sylvia is here to provide this really important tether to Kenneth above, or yeah, to humanity, it's like Verona is also bringing her mum into this because Verona wants to show her mum the cool shit she's been doing, and that's not usually what a 14-year-old does with their parent. But it's like, it almost sets up this thing where Verona wants to improve Sylvia's life as much as Sylvia improves hers. And again, like, that sort of balance in the relationship isn't usually, parenting's much more of a sacrificial one-sided dynamic for the first 18
Mm.
years. Um, so yeah, like, I find that the other interesting part of this is like, this is almost trying to do as much for Sylvia as it is for Verona. Even if I don't think Sylvia has quite realized that yet.
Mhm. Yeah, speaking of the whole Verona wanting to treat or Sylvia to treat her as like one of her friends, I really appreciated that she really spelled it out like,
Yeah,
you know, because I someone in the community at some point had the idea of like, oh, I bet Sylvia's gonna really jump into magic and think it's awesome and like treat it like a fun, cool project she can learn about, and she hasn't. And part of that has been, I think, the way she's been exposed to it and like trying to
Yeah,
figure out, like, aren't I a mom? Aren't these things like scary and bad? How do I, you know,
yeah,
but like Verona finally saying, like, for the reader almost, like, hey, you were supposed to think this was super fucking cool and like have a bunch of cool ideas. Like Kelsey throws out a bunch of like weird, cool business shit, and like, you're the like fun, weird ideas person. And so finally having Sylvia think about that was really satisfying. Um, and hopefully she can, yeah, come up with cool stuff. It is kind of funny thinking of her staying in Kennet Below. It seems like it fits almost as well as like Jasmine staying in Kennet Found. Like,
that's exactly what I thought. I was like, wow, I really had Sylvia pegged as Kennet Found vibes, not Kennet Below vibes.
but I guess that's the place that needs it. So
Yeah. And I mean, I guess, we're building a new Kennet Below. Like, as much as Verona is getting excited to build her new domain, the focus of this chapter is almost on her plans for what Kennet Below can be now. Um,
Mhm.
so I was like, I guess, you want someone like Sylvia who's a little bit less Charles's version of Kennet Below, because most of the people left there are the people who sided with Charles. Um,
Hmm.
so I can see the logic of why, yeah, you want to inject some different energy in there. Um, yeah, I don't know. I thought that was fascinating too. I was like, I did not have Sylvia pegged as a Kennet Below person.
Yeah, but maybe Verona's big new plan will help Kennet Below be more of a place Sylvia would be okay with or something.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there was a lot of room to improve. Like, I think Kennet Below's transformation, like whether we see like a few years down the line in this story, or whether it's like we come back to Kennet in a future story, what Kennet Below has turned into is maybe one of the top things I want to see in the distant future. Because
Hmm.
yeah, like Kennet Below was the most Charlesy one, but like one of the big things is Kennet really established that they don't believe in Kennet above, they don't believe in Kennet found, and they don't believe in Kennet below. They believe in like hybridizing all three.
Hmm.
But there was that war for what the Kennet below aspect of that triangle looked like, and now that there's not that war, like what does Kennet's version of Kennet below look like? Because it's always going to be a little bit intense. Like it's very visceral, very goblin-y. Like even the good parts of Kennet below, like the vice principal, were kind of fucked up. Um,
Hmm.
so like what does Kennet below, where they're calling all the shots about what it look like, is fascinating to me.
Right. Maybe pushing a lot of the goblins to like be down there more often slash most of the time, and bringing in like, maybe the Bitterstreet Witch can come back for a while. It is fascinating that like Kennet Below was a problem to be solved, and now it's like
Yeah.
the opposite problem to be solved. Like it was like
Yeah,
a
it's
oh
like, oh
shit,
shit, it's gone. We want it back.
right. Like it's like, oh, there's this like scary like alternate thing that's gonna like corrupt our town, and now it's like we need that balancing,
Mm,
part.
mm,
We need, but
exactly.
also like we miss Mal, we miss Anselm, we miss a lot of those people, the vice principal. Like we we have learned to value them. Um and
Yeah.
so we want a place for people like that.
Well, yeah, and like, can it found, I think in my head ties a lot to the paths. Like we talked a bit about the abyss versus the paths, and I very much see that duo being reflected a lot in Kennet Below and Kennet Found. Like Kennet Below is the abyssally spin on Kennet, and it's very fun trying to answer the question. Like we've seen the abyss in the story, and it sounds like a kind of irredeemable piece of shit. But like Kennet Below is maybe the attempt to actually define a version of that energy that works, like this version of abyssal Charlesy energy that is productive, and that's fascinating.
Mhm.
That's why, like, I'd love to see the Milkmaid and Killwagon, as well as all the goblins, be a part of redefining Kennet Below.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, anyway, so Veroda's mom reaffirms that she is going to stay, and so we move out of empty Kennet Below and into Kennet Found. Cherry Pop is here, but really what happens is Verona finalizes the deal with her mum and then declares who she is and what she's going to do. And
Yeah.
it's such a hype ending.
It was weird how it was both like super hype and also I cried. Um
Yeah.
Although the part that got me was, they walk and they walk to John's memorial and she says, "I hope we did okay by you," and sees like Lucy's flower. Lucy's already been here or whatever. And like that was really heartbreaking. But then something about like when she says it again and can it found, and then like Miss and Liz are there and they're like nod, and I'm just like, okay, I'm dead now. Like I'm crying. That was
Well,
great.
yeah, like because again, the big thing for Verona has been having a place in this story. Like, we like obviously all the stuff with Brett's house, and something we didn't call out explicitly enough, but there were a lot of great mirrors, not just of 1.1 in this chapter, but of the scene where she and Macaulay and her friends like went through Brett's house's ashes, and there were fun inversions there where that was picking up the pieces. This was building something new. But sorry, getting back on topic, like Verona has always kind of struggled to feel at home in humanity in Kennet or whatever. And so this moment of her being like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, have I done well enough? And then like Liz and Miz are the two like embodiments of Kennet. Like they are the spirits of the three layers of Kennet. So it's like them nodding at her as like this city magic esque like acknowledgement from Kennet that she belongs here and has their backing. And that's just like this great outro. Like this could be the last we see of Verona in the whole story, and it would be perfect. Because it's just like Verona's here, she's able to voice her needs, she's able to like affirm who she is, and then she's able to get the backing of like the town that she lives in, and that's just like everything she didn't have at the start of the story. It's so good.
Yes. I think another thing, like another part of the reason why this made me cry was that, like, they shouldn't have had to do any of this at all. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's what like the parents and stuff point out, but like these are children, like you all need to like fight your own battles and not have these children be doing this for you. And like part of it is like they're so great and they took this so seriously, and they also did explicitly want some practitioners to be used as like a shield buffer against the practitioner world, that like they were put in this position. um and just like they did so like such an extraordinary job. The idea that like that would be a question in Verona's mind is devastating. Um, and it reminds me of the like what I think of as the tagline of this story, which is Matthew, I think in 1.1, but maybe 1.2, saying like, we need you to look into it. No need to solve it. Simply look into it.
Yeah.
And like, boy, did they look into it. Like,
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's such a good. Yeah. But
And
then, like, on the other hand, I just love that Verona is, like, I think something that dogged Verona a lot at the start of the story was she never kind of knew if what she was doing was the right thing or not. That was part of why she wanted to go other. She was just sick of trying.
mm,
Um, and so it's like, yeah, like, as much as it kind of sucks that she is asking that sort of question, I think it's such a huge thing for her that she can, like, ask that question and get a response and be told, like,
mhm,
yes, like, yeah, this is, you are doing good. Like, I think that's something that her and Lucy share a bit, is
mm.
uh that love of getting uh people affirming that they're not crazy.
Yeah. I I also think though that if like you had given me this, or I'd been given this sentence out of context and been asked, okay, what to the Kenneteers would say this in an epilogue, I would say I don't know, but not Verona. Um because like Verona has been like Lucy is very much about like striving for righteousness and justice and like fighting for people, and Avery is like very conscious of other people and wanting to like have these connections and make them happy. And the fact that like not that like Verona was like a selfish bitch or whatever, but like she the confirmation that like serving Kenneth was as important to Verona as the others. I don't know. Some just
Yeah.
yeah. I thought about this sentence for a really long time. It was a lot.
No, I get exactly what you mean. It's like I think you're sort of right. Like early on, Verona was kind of just in it for herself, but that was not like a good thing. It was more that she. I mean, we had all the stuff where they went through the alternate lives, where they were alone, where Verona had to start to realize that actually maybe she was kind of a good person.
Mhm.
Um, and like now she wants her humanity, and I think it was like just early in the story she kind of given up on life, and so that was why it seemed like she was a bit more selfish or whatever. And now that that's not the case, that's why we've seen this sort of turnaround, and that's why it feels so important. Yeah. Um. But yeah, gosh. So that's God. I feel like I could talk about this chapter for another hour. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that we probably didn't call out. Like, so many fun. It's great rereading, particularly 1.1 and 1.4 after reading this epilogue and seeing how many
Mhm.
direct sort of inversions there are of exactly how the Kenneteers' mind spaces worked back then. Um, I fully recommend if you're listening to this, like, and you've got the time, reread 1.1 and 1.4 and kind of be amazed at how much the Kenneteers have addressed all the issues they had in those first few chapters.
Yes.
Also, I forget which chapter it was, and I didn't do this in it's anywhere near as enough detail as I'd like, but the chapter where Verona cleaned out Brett's house is also referenced a lot in this chapter, and it's great. But yeah, should we hit up our discussion question? Because I am looking at the time. This episode's already run a bit long.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we got a lot of answers for this one because we asked everyone what was your favorite moment in Pale that wouldn't be in most other people's top 10. And whew, we'll get into it. We'll start. I'll just make my way down the list. Propaganda Pagoda called out this moment in chapter 5.2 where Matt sort of realizes how great the Kenneteers are. I think he says, "Thanks for coming to help Kenneth," and Verona's like, "I'm glad to," and that's when Matt sort of is first like, "Holy shit, where did Miss find you three?" Um, and yeah, it's sort of the first moment where Verona is like, "Oh wow, Matt actually maybe likes us." It's a great little moment of self affirmation for the trio.
Mhm.
Sorry, not self, just affirmation. Propaganda Pagoda also called out Toad Swallow being a bit of a general slash headmaster at the Blue Heron during the Bristow Alexander stuff. And yeah, just a couple of great call outs there.
Yeah. Um, David L. Hunt calls out Gillimay's speech to Clem about the world and how it's unfair. And like, wow, I barely remember that, but yeah. like uh
Yeah, I
just
love this call out. I agree. That's a great speech. I don't remember the details very specifically, but the speech itself, like, or the energy of it is stuck in my head for sure.
mhm.
Um, Sleepy Stapler called out the Goblin Princess transformations, just all of them. And I have to admit, this is the correct answer. Those Goblin Princess transformations are, to this day, the coolest use of practice we've seen. Like crucibles, paths, whatever. Like smoke bomb goblin outfit transformations. That's the shit.
Mhm.
Um, they also called out what might be my favorite individual line in Pale, which is when Snowdrop is captured by Nicolette at the end of 2.z. And Nicolette's like, "Are you going to stay here and be good?" And Snowdrop is like, "Absolutely." And so then Nicolette leaves her, and Snowdrop burns the library down. It's great.
Yes. Budagami calls out when everyone in Kennet like rallies against Musser, and I don't remember if this note is literal.
So this was their direct quote in their discussion question answer, and I had the same thing. So Budagami said that they all tell Go Masa to plow a bear trap, and I don't know if that was Budagami adding colorful language or whether they literally did that, but I liked the phrasing either way.
Mhm. Um, and then also just like moments where the Kenneteers like talked out their problems. And I, yeah, just lots of those moments of talking through things, working through things.
Yeah, like very specifically, Budagami called out how they hate that like trope in fiction of like intergroup conflict, kind of for the sake of adding conflict to the story and like
Mm-hmm.
miscommunication. Like Budagami loved how the Kenneteers would just like most of the time, if there was tension in the group, they'd just call it out and talk about it. Um, and yeah, like I agree. That's one of my favorite things about The Expanse. Like if Budagami, if you're listening to this and that's one of your favorite parts about Pale, go read The Expanse because The Expanse is like teamwork porn. It's great. Um, can't recommend it enough for that exact energy.
Yeah, it can be really frustrating when a story relies on like this could all have been solved if they had literally just talked to each other. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that's kind of fun, but the Kenneteers definitely don't have that problem,
No,
which is great.
I agree. Like it's a common trope for a reason. Like it can really work, but sometimes it just feels a bit overused or forced.
Hmm.
Particularly if you do something like watch CW shows. Um, So, like, I do really cherish stories like Pale and The Expanse, which specifically counteract this trope and like work around it.
Hmm.
Um, Landis963 just sort of called out that their favorite thing in stories is like fantastical vistas and stuff. So they specifically call out the promenade and the various fairy markets we've seen as their favorite things in the story. Like they just love these magical spaces.
Hobo Demon references another thing I don't fully remember, but sounds fun, which is when Bubble Yum took Biscuit's crocodile. Oh wait,
Crocodile, I
was that
think?
the
I don't.
like the crazy potion thing that made her like?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I didn't
Oh,
remember the name
yeah.
of it, but that was
A
awesome.
couple of arcs ago. Yeah. Oh, no,
Yeah,
last arc, even. End of last arc, I
that's
think.
insane.
Um, Coblin called out their favorite chapter, basically being that one in arc, or sorry, chapters that in arc 16 when Nora and Liberty meet and then like
Ugh.
Avery runs the build up with Liberty and Liberty comes out as bi, and it's like Coblin sort of wrote a great little summary of how it was for them this perfect mix of like Thunder Bay normal human life stuff with all the drama of the romantic tension and then like magic shenanigans on top of it with Liberty running the build up. Like it's
Mhm.
just this for them. That section was just the perfect blend of all these aspects that Pale has nailed all over the place. And I love that answer.
And Jude always makes things better. Um.
True. Yeah. Jude might be my low key my favorite, one of my favorite characters in the story.
Oh yeah. Um. Ghostly Bird references when John talked about weakening Alexander by shooting him in the head. And luckily, Tommy B provided the quote in the chat, I believe, where he says, I weakened
Yeah.
him. You shot him in the head. Yes, that weakened him. And then he died.
Yeah, it's something like I think it's like you shot him in the head, and it's like yes, it left him
Oh, we
quite weak
paraphrased it.
after that.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it was a great line. Like I had originally thought that after this question we could ask like what's the best quote in Pale or that sort of thing, but like a lot of people have just brought their favorite quotes for this one, and like honestly, now looking at it, I'm like I don't know that anything could beat John describing how he shot Alexander as weakening him. That might be the best quote in Pale. Um, Vice Versailles wrote a very good, very thorough answer of stuff we've had her talk about in the podcast before, but I really recommend you go and read this one if you're only going to read one answer. But it's basically her deep dive into Anthem and Lucy fighting Grayson and Mussa Senior in the Sword Moot, and basically just her once again making this very good case she has for why it's the perfect part of the story. Yeah, great answer, very thorough. Go read it if you can.
Um, Priestley identifies Gabe's interlude as one of their favorite parts. It's I still think it's like the most disturbing part of Pale. Maybe I just like wasn't expecting it, but whenever I think about the Hungry Choir ritual, I'm upset.
I loved it at the time because especially like we were coming off the back of Pact, so like obviously like the section of Pact you're up to was like 3 months back for us, so that was that was the energy for this universe, like the packed readers were coming in with.
Mhm.
And so then Pale starts, and it was much more like charming and like, the world was dangerous, but it was like three, little kids just exploring the wonders of magic, blah, blah, and it like kind of seemed like Pale was going to be a lot more kid friendly. And then Gabe's interlude just kind of sledgehammers you in the face with like Gabe trying to eat his own vomit as his essence is sucked up by a ritual incarnate. Like yeah, it
It's
was such a
so
tone setter for the rest of the story. Sort of like Gabe's interlude is the like, hey, you need to be ready for some fucked up shit if you're going to read the rest of this story. Just a heads up.
Mhm.
Dusk Bassett calls out that funny moment where Biscuit was trying to get Jasmine to give her drugs from the hospital, and Biscuit talks about how she's actually very pro drug treatment programs, and then Connor calls out how those programs usually backfire and make people's addictions worse, and Biscuit is sort of like, oh fuck, like yes, that's why I support them, but don't say that. It's just a very funny moment.
Yeah, that's pretty great. Fancy Swap calls out a couple of different things, including 13.6 as being the best chapter. When Avery fights the Fey Wolf, is that same
Yeah,
chapter?
sorry, this whole answer is talking about 13.6. Like they're pointing out it's their
Oh.
favorite chapter because Avery fights the Fauna Ephemera wolf. And she does it with help from Dish Lot, and also Buddy is there. But then that's also the chapter where she and Miss meet with the Garricks and do the negotiation for going to the promenade.
Mm.
It's also the chapter where Y asks for their help with Raquel. Like it's just, yeah, they bring up a good case for why it's like just a chapter with like 4 or 5 separate banger scenes in it. It's also they called out what they think the best quote in the story might be, which is from this chapter where Avery hosts Lot and says to the wolf, "Hey, Papa Wolf, might want to send your pups and babies away, because if you pick this fight, there's a chance that seeing you get your ass kicked would scar them for life."
Oh, she's so fucking cool.
Wildbow has just mentioned in the chat that he loves the Mammary Hammers thing. So nobody else called that out, Wildbow, but don't worry, I'll attribute it to you now.
Yes.
I don't think that was his intention, but I'm now counting that as Wildbow's answer.
I'm pretty sure that it's because that's obviously in everyone's top 10. So everyone who answered this question was like, "Oh, okay, not that one. It's too obvious."
It's funny because I'm even right now I'm like, her name was Giselle, right? But in my head, she's still the big boob chick who's familiar as the wolf, and then I eventually remember her name. But the Mammary Hammers monologue has left such an impression in my head that that's the first attribute I associate with her instead of her name. Or the fact that she has the wolf as her familiar, which is kind of crazy that isn't top billing.
Yep.
Yes. Tommy B is saying that their top 10 moment is the bondage hamster from the same chapter.
Oh, yeah, that was wild. Top Series 341 talks about the first Goblin Market in the one in Kennet. Was that the one?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Gosh, I'm trying to remember what arc
great.
that was in.
It was before Christmas, right?
Yeah, I want to say 15 or 16.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. It's such a cursed inversion of the fairy markets. Yeah.
And just great seeing them trying to build this new exciting thing and making, Kennet fun.
Yeah. We've also got normal non-eldritch guy who specifically flagged that they can't choose Lucy's implement ritual, Verona's domain ritual, or Avery and Snowdrop's familiar ritual because those are obviously top 10 candidates. So they then wrote this great answer kind of summarizing why they think the borrowed eyes extra material is the best sort of moment in the story. Like it's, the closest we've come to any kind of visual adaptation of Wildbow's work. It was official. It was this great moment for Alexander because this was that point in the story where it had kind of seemed like Alexander was getting absolutely shat on by Bristow. And it was like, is Alexander going to do anything? And then he comes back in this extra material and just, yeah, I don't know, destroys it.
Totally.
Yeah, like, does some fucked up shit. Has some of Bristow's sperm from memory.
Get out myself.
Just great times.
That was fun. Sweet Manzana talks about 19.17 when the Cannoteers challenge Musser, and everyone, rallies around the Cannoteers. And then also just Mal in general.
Yeah. I think specifically they pivoted to Mal after quoting parts of 1917, and this is the part where Mal backs Verona and talks about how great Verona is, and like they just have some very funny banter because Mal's kind of shit at hyping up her friend seriously. And then Manzana just sort of pivoted there and sort of talking about how great Mal is.
Yep.
We've got Charles Zal also answered, and they gave a couple because they weren't sure. So they said Anne versus the Ordinary Family was a great moment. Milo's death at Guillaume/Lucy's hand.
100%.
Monty and the Turtle Queen helping Gillian after she got horrified. And then just all of Dorian's interlude. And those are 4 great answers.
Yes. Tomato Sauce 3 talks about Jen and Gillian's interludes, which definitely incredible. And then also there's a question that I don't know what it refers to.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Tomato Sauce's name. Do you think they're an Australian user? Because here we call ketchup tomato sauce. And I want to know if Tomato Sauce 3 is referencing ketchup or if they're referencing whatever you guys call tomato sauce. It's like pasta sauce or some shit.
Yeah, I think of tomato sauce as like probably like what you put on pizza. Like if you're not going to say marinara or whatever, you probably say tomato sauce. But also, yeah, we'd say tomato sauce. We wouldn't say pizza sauce. And it reminds me of like tomato paste. I think tomato sauce is something you can get canned like tomato paste, but not tomato paste.
Yeah, no, so here tomato sauce is, ketchup. Basically.
Wild.
Anyway, so tomato sauce. Let us know if you're Australian or if you're referencing, not ketchup.
Pizza sauce.
Yeah, change your name to pizza sauce. But yeah, sorry. They also, their most of their answer was actually referencing Jen and Gillian's double interlude of the Bahame.
Definitely.
No, not Bahame.
Bellinger.
What's their family called? Yeah.
I think.
Place getting raided.
I was like, no, I forgot. Okay.
I know. Sorry. Those names are too similar. And finally, we got an answer from Lurking Beluga, who wanted to call out 9.9, but assumed 9.9 would be in most people's top 10. Which, of course, 9.9 is that scene where Verona has the fight with Brett, her mask gets broken, and then she finds the furs. So they decided to instead do 10.4, which is when Sylvia and Verona come back after their vacation for Arc 10. And, we find out they've got Miss with them. And, just in general, it's like the closure to 9.9 in a very fun way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Arc 10 is one of my favorites. And
yeah,
Verona at the beach really, stood out.
I've also just gotten a notification from Reddit that I'm Easily Impressed submitted an answer 7 days ago. So I don't know what that's about. That's so weird. It says it was sent 7 days ago, but why don't we just get the message? Anyway, basically, I'm Easily Impressed has called out the ritual to get Jessica's cousin's spirit back, which Shelley, comes and ruins. But like just this first moment for us as readers kind of really seeing all these practitioners and disciplines working together and synergizing to do something unambiguously good. And then because we're in Avery's head, we really get the outrage at what Shelley just did.
She just super fucks it up.
Yeah, yeah. They also gave an honorable mention to mistelling why Reed and Raquel that Solomon was forsworn. Because you can't be in this fandom without hearing Solomon, who was forsworn, every couple of hours.
It's just so hype.
But yeah, anyway, so that's all the discussion question answers we got. That's a lot more than normal, but we're asking another discussion question this week, which is what obscure character, practice, or other part of the world of Pale is something that you'd want to learn more about one day? And just to cut out one answer in particular, you're not allowed to talk about 100 Years Lost. Pisces is not an answer that is valid for this question. He's not obscure. We've all obsessed over Pisces for almost 2 years now. We're talking about something obscure, not Pisces. Please and thank you.
Yeah. If you pick one of the random little others that Hazel runs across, like maybe. But
yeah. People in the chat are already talking about submitting the constructions or Pisces fellows, and I just want to say those answers are not getting read out. You can submit them to your heart's content, but I know what bullshit you're pulling, and they're not getting read out. Whereas, yeah, what Malia said, if it was like one of her buddies, then sure.
I just feel like the place with the keys or something, and like the
Yeah,
cat,
the
and, like,
keyways.
yeah, that
Something.
place was
Yeah.
cool and frightening.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of paths that could make this list for sure. Kit Can Alley. Let's get the deep dive on Kit Can Alley, I say. Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that's it. The Wildbow story. Wildbow, your next story should be called Punt, and it's just a deep dive into Kit Can Alley.
I want a series of vignettes of like the most significant runs of that path. Just like
Yeah. Or do the story from the perspective of Kit Can Alley.
yes.
So each chapter is like a different person running Kit Can Alley, and we see the growth of the path from the path's POV.
Yes.
Oh, guys, we nailed it. What a great, the perspective of the can, that's even better.
Wow.
But yeah, anyway, so you can submit those answers in the discussion thread on Reddit, which is linked in the show notes down below. Also, don't forget, in those show notes is the form to submit fan art to be nominated for the fan art awards show that we're going to do in All Packed Up 2.
Woo! Other things that you can do that would really help us out include reviewing us on your podcast app of choice. It really, really helps. And as we're gearing up for All Packed Up to All Paled Up Beyond the Pale, we could use that extra little boost of traffic.
Yeah, help people find Pale by helping our podcast too. I mean, it's a win-win-win.
Definitely.
Don't forget to check out our website, doofmedia.com. That's where you'll find details on the fan art contest that's just sort of wrapping up as this episode's come out. But, also all the other shows on the Doof Media Network. Obviously, we've stolen Malia this week. And, she and Jenny are getting very, very close to the end of Pact in Pale comparison. So now's the perfect time to jump on board of that and see the end of Pact with them.
I should binge the whole thing.
I mean, you can binge through Pact pretty quick. It's not only very short by Wildbow serial standards, it's also just so addictive. I think Malia and I are the only ones stupid enough to not read it instantly after the fact.
Right. If you as a normal person can get to the end of a chapter and not be like, fuck, I have to keep reading, I'm shocked.
Yeah.
But while you're on our website, you can check out our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, or there's probably a link from our website to our Patreon. Our patrons do cool things like vote in our fan art contest, and support all of the weird ass shit that Elliot and Ruben will be getting up to on their live stream.
Yeah, exactly. Although we're already in talks with other people who are going to join us for that live stream at various points, so hopefully it won't just be us making idiots out of ourselves or doing goofy shit, but we'll see. Anyway, and also don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon. I mean, we're in the epilogues if you're listening to this, presumably you've listened to far too much Pale Reflections, as well as read not enough, but still lots of Pale. So Wobbo deserves whatever extra cash you can afford to sling his way.
Yeah. He has done good by us.
Yeah, so do good by him.
Yeah.
And gosh, I have just realized I've forgotten to choose a pickup line. Okay, I got one. No, actually, I don't like that one. Okay, I've got a different one. Hey, honey, are you a boog? Because you've taken over my thoughts.